Thank you so much for... I know, thanks so much for joining me, John Taylor, Roger Taylor from Duran Duran.
Hello.
I've got to say, this is an absolute dream come true for me. I've been a fan of yours since I was 8 years old. Huge. Yeah. And when I told my partner that I was coming, he said, how nervous are you? And I said, I was actually more nervous about a C-section that I had 7 months ago. Less nervous about a Caesar.
For that, didn't you?
Yeah, and I would have it. I would have it again tomorrow than do this. I'm just beside myself. My sister wants to know. She's wanted to meet you for 30 years, and I think she might get the chance tonight. She wants to know: is it possible to have a stroke out of excitement, and what sort of...
I wonder what sort of stroke you meant then.
Ooh,
bum bum.
Well, have you ever had anybody completely lose their mind when they met you?
I think it happened a few days in the early days, actually. You'd kind of go into a shoe shop, you know, to buy a pair of shoes, and, you know, if the sales assistant was a fan, they'd freak out and almost collapse, which is kind of weird when you're just trying to do an everyday, you know, part of your life.
And it still happens now?
You know, the kids were much more intense.
Yeah.
In those days, they tend to just hang around in the lobby now and have cocktails and.
Well, the kids are cool.
Try and blend in.
Women of a certain age are not, I would imagine. John?
They can get themselves a little worked up at times, you know, when they've been waiting for a while, and then they panic that they're not going to get to say what they want. They've been waiting to say, and that there may not be the time. And
what do they want to say more often than not?
I have no idea.
Tuesday, I've been waiting to meet you for 30 years.
Yeah, just like me. How tedious.
Okay. I want to talk about... to marry me, and I'll tell you why.
It's odd. You said, I think it was in the late 80s, you said, it was a really great quote about the way things changed for you and the band, is that it used to be sort of a groovy thing, and then the Fab Five happened and it all went wrong, you said. What did you mean by that?
Did he say that?
Apparently.
Well, I think I must have been referring to the sort of the teen idol thing that was never really on our, you know, that was not,
never on the agenda,
you know, really. No. I mean, we were elitists, you know, cultists. We kind of like imagined our bands sort of like, I don't know, being some kind of underground sort of, you know, fashion thing, you know, and...
but you were so gorgeous, you must have expected it.
Well, strangely enough, we hadn't really factored that in. None of us, I think that's part of our appeal. We didn't have that sense of, oh, aren't we gorgeous? We didn't think of ourselves in that way. You know?
I mean, the world was a lot smaller in the 80s. In particular, Australia was so far away from the UK, and it seemed so romantic. And we would buy smash hits on Import, you know, the magazine. And it just seemed like you were all over there having this incredible Fun Boy 3 and Toya and you. And were you all friends, or was it not really like that?
I wouldn't say that we were friends, because it was it was ultra competitive in the 80s, and everybody had their own little sort of niche.
Yeah.
It's like if you like, you know, I don't know, if you were into reggae, you were into reggae. If you were into punk, you were into that. If you were into heavy rock, you know, everything was very divided. So I think that kind of made it very hard for the bands to integrate. But it was very, very good, because it was very competitive. You know, we had the competition was enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many great bands. You know, and we came off the back of Bowie and Roxy Music and the punk movement and the glam movement. I mean, Roxy Music and Bowie were still making incredible records at that point, and people like Japan, Ultravox, all making fantastic records. So it was a real healthy competition, I think. Not that much friendliness, I wouldn't say.
No, there's a lot of the bands from that era. I don't know so much about the UK ones, but Australian ones from the 80s have sort of become caricatures of themselves and are doing a lot of sort of revival work, which you're not doing. How do you stay so contemporary and current?
Well, probably by doing new albums is one way, for sure. I mean, we've always had a thing about reinvention. We tried in the mid-80s to rewrite one of the songs off Rio, and it just didn't work. And right away, you realize you just can't go back. You can't, you know, and I think a lot of artists get hung up on those ideas about trying to repeat something that they already did. So that lesson we learned quite early on. So we've just had to you know, keep reinventing ourselves. We've also had sort of lineup changes. You know, different guitar players have come in, and so we've had to sort of change the sound up a little bit every time. But I have to say, I don't put anybody down for whatever they're doing. You know, if they're still making a living out of music 20 or 30 years after they first launched themselves, that takes something.
Yeah, they're doing well. Do you keep ahead of all the new stuff that's happening? I read an article once that Elvis Costello said that Destiny's Child's "Say My Name" was a really great song, and I was like, oh, good. Well, I can like it then. Huh. So, what are you listening to? What do you love?
I think we certainly do keep up with, what's happening. I mean, obviously, it's nothing as good as the period that we grew up in. You know, that was such a golden era. Yeah. For music, you know, I mean, the Killers have been great, haven't they? I think Coldplay have, seem to be standing the test of time.
No, you're mad on the tweet, aren't you? I've been following.
He's a tweetaholic. Actually.
He's a tweety.
He's a tweety.
Yeah, well, you know,
somebody's got to do it in the band.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I got onto it because we put All You Need Is Now out on. We did an exclusive with iTunes, the album when it first came out. And that was something I'd kind of pushed for, and I suddenly, when the album went out that way, I suddenly felt quite guilty and thought, oh God, I've got to get up on the social networking. Signed up to Facebook and Twitter, and actually the week that the album came out, you know, because you're a Facebooker, I'm a tweeter, and we had a great ride that week the album came out. Yeah. I mean, it was actually the most fun that we've had with an album release in years. And, you really had this sense of being connected to, what was happening all around the world. And that sort of that got me hooked, But, I can go, I mean, it's one of those things I'm always thinking, oh, maybe I should tweet that. And I'm like, don't be such an idiot.
Yeah, could you be bothered?
It's so banal,
That's what it's all about, though, isn't it?
It is. People would be delighted to see what you were having for dinner. I know that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You don't want to play along. Speaking of All You Need Is Now, the latest film clip, Girl Panic, is awesome.
Thank you.
How much sort of time did the supermodels have to spend with you to method act?
Much time as possible.
You were Helena Christensen, is that right? She plays you?
That's right, yeah. I had to teach her to play the drums, actually, in about an hour.
You did, really?
Which was interesting and great fun. But it didn't take very long to do that whole thing, because they're friends anyway. And obviously, Yasmin and Simon are married. And so it came together very quickly. And because it's a good idea, it was very quick and easy. Yeah. It's like records. If you have a good idea and it makes sense, the record gets made really, really quickly. And it was like that with the video. It was completely painless.
Did you get to choose? Did you get to choose which supermodel played you? Did you get to choose Cindy Crawford, John?
No, I don't think I did. I think it was
It was made above our heads. I think, that decision.
But it certainly made sense. With those cheekbones of hers.
It's very true. Now, I've got to ask you two personal questions. One, Late Bar, my favourite song. Why was it only ever a B-side?
That's a real train-spotting question, that is. Well, it was one of the first songs. It was the producer, Colin Thurston. It would have been made, that decision was made about the time that we singled out Planet Earth and said, okay, that's going to be the first single. But you see, back then, there was no
back in the day.
There was no shame in being a B-side. I mean, B-sides, were supposed to be cool. Yeah. They were supposed to be interesting tracks.
Yeah, it was a value add, not just a throwaway.
That made a single a special item, and we always try to do that. I mean, when you get so short on material that you have to have your A and your B side, and we're talking about, who cares about singles anymore, but back then, when there was this 7-inch piece of plastic that had 2 songs on it, both songs were equally as important, especially when it was your first single, because that was those were going to be the first 2 songs that were going to introduce the band to the audience around the world, and the idea of one of those songs not being on the album made that song more precious, I think.
It's very true. Kylie just did an entire couple of shows here just on B-sides. Would you ever do that?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Just B-sides. Half the
That's
auditorium was
interesting.
like, I don't know this song.
Yeah,
Right.
you'd have to have a real
Yeah.
hardcore audience for that one, wouldn't you? But it's an
Yeah.
interesting idea.
It's a cute idea. We need to wrap it up. I tell you what, it was such a delight to meet you guys, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Good luck
Thank you.
tonight with the show.